Did you know that according to some studies, over 80% of people admit to lying on their dating profiles? A little lie about their height, an old photo from 10 years and 20 pounds ago, small, seemingly harmless deceptions. But that's how it always starts, isn't it? With a small crack in the foundation. In my line of work, we have a saying, the small lies are the gateways to the big ones. For decades, I sat across from people in sterile, windowless rooms, and my entire job was to find the truth buried under layers of those lies. It's a skill you develop. You learn to listen to what isn't being said. You learn to see the flicker of an emotion someone is trying to suppress. It's a necessary tool when the stakes are high: a crime, a victim, a life in the balance. But what happens when you take those tools out of the box and into the messiest, most emotionally compromised arena of all? Modern dating. A young mentee of mine, we'll call him Alex, came to me a while back. He was convinced that dating was an impossible game, a minefield of deception and performance. He said, "Arthur, it feels like everyone is just playing a part. How do you ever know who someone really is?" So, I proposed a little experiment, a challenge. For 1 month, he would approach dating using the core principles of my old profession. Not the intimidation, not the coercion, let's be perfectly clear about that, but the principles of observation, strategic inquiry, and rapport building. I laid out the rules. Rule number 1, and it's the most important, this is not about turning a date into an interrogation. A suspect in a room is a subject to be understood for a specific purpose: solving a case. A person across the dinner table is a potential partner. The goal is not a confession, it's a connection. Manipulation is off the table. The objective is clarity, not control. Psychologically, what we're talking about is managing cognitive load. It takes more mental energy to lie than to tell the truth. You have to invent the lie, maintain the lie, and ensure it doesn't contradict other things you've said. In an interrogation, we apply pressure to increase that load until the lies start to crumble. In dating, the goal is the opposite. It's to reduce the pressure so the other person doesn't feel the need to lie in the first place. It's about creating an environment where authenticity feels less risky than performance. It's a subtle shift, but it's everything. Have you ever been on a date where it felt like you were being interviewed for a job? That's someone applying pressure, consciously or not, and it makes you want to retreat, to put up your defenses. Our experiment was about dismantling those defenses on both sides. Alex was skeptical, but he was also desperate. He agreed to my terms. For weeks, for principles, and a full report back to me. The first week's assignment was about observation. In the field, we call it establishing a baseline. You watch someone when they're calm, when they're discussing neutral topics, the weather, the traffic. You learn their normal patterns of speech, their tics, their posture. Any deviation from that baseline later on, when you touch on a sensitive topic, is significant. The most potent tool for this is reading micro-expressions. These are involuntary flashes of emotion that streak across a person's face. In a fraction of a second, a flicker of contempt, a shadow of sadness, a spark of genuine joy. They are nearly impossible to fake and even harder to suppress. They leak the truth. I remember a case once, a high-level corporate fraud investigation. The CFO was cool as ice. He had an answer for everything. But I noticed that every time I mentioned the name of his junior assistant, a tiny, almost imperceptible sneer would tighten the corner of his lip. It was contempt. That was the thread. We pulled it, and the entire multi-million-dollar scheme unraveled. The assistant was his accomplice. His face confessed before he ever did. So I sent Alex to a coffee shop for a first date with this principle in mind. His task wasn't to stare at the woman like a specimen under a microscope, but simply to be present and notice. Not to judge, just to notice. He was to pay attention to the congruence between her words and her face. When she said she loved her high-stress job as a lawyer, did her eyes light up with passion, or did they betray a momentary exhaustion? When he mentioned his passion for restoring old motorcycles, did her polite smile reach her eyes, or was it just a social courtesy? He called me after the date, a little rattled. He said, "Arthur, it worked, but maybe too well." He noticed that when he spoke about his demanding work schedule, her smile was a mask. There was no warmth in her eyes, just a polite, vacant look. It was a micro-expression of disinterest, or perhaps polite tolerance. He knew, right then, that a second date was unlikely to be built on a foundation of genuine interest. He saw the truth, but here's where the tool backfired. He became so consumed with looking for these tells that he forgot to be a person. He was so focused on analyzing her every twitch that he wasn't truly listening to her stories. He was an observer, not a participant. The conversation felt stilted to him because he was the one stalling it, stuck in his own head. He was so busy trying to read her that he forgot to let her read him. I had to remind him, the point of noticing an emotion is not to file it away as evidence, Alex. It's to use it as a cue for empathy. If you see a flicker of sadness when she talks about her hometown, you don't write in your notepad, "Subject displays sadness." You gently ask, "It sounds like that place holds a lot of memories for you." You use it to connect, not to dissect. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and you just knew they weren't really listening? They were just waiting for their turn to talk, or worse, analyzing you. How did it make you feel? For the second week, we moved from passive observation to active inquiry. I call it peeling the onion. Most civilian conversation stays on the surface. You ask closed-ended questions that can be answered with a yes or a no or a simple fact. Do you like your job? Have you traveled much? It's data exchange, not a conversation. In an interrogation, you learn to ask open-ended questions that force a person to tell a story. You don't ask a witness, "Did you see a blue car?" You ask, "Tell me what you remember about the street right after you heard the noise." The first question gives you a fact. The second gives you a world. It gives you details the witness didn't even know they considered important. And in those details, you find the truth. We use a funnel technique. Start broad and then, based on their narrative, gently narrow the focus toward the information you need. I tasked Alex with applying this to a dinner date. His mission, no more boring questions. He was to transform his inquiries from data collection into invitations. Instead of asking, "Do you have any siblings?" he asked, "What was it like growing up in your family?" Instead of, "Do you like to travel?" he tried, "If you could clear your schedule for a month, no questions asked. What's one trip you would take and why?" These questions don't just ask what, they ask how and why. They uncover values, dreams, fears, and priorities. They reveal a person's inner landscape. A simple question about a fantasy trip can tell you if someone values relaxation or adventure, solitude or community, luxury or simplicity. It's a treasure map to their personality. The results were immediate and powerful. He told me the conversation was the most engaging he'd ever had on a first date. He learned that her dream trip involved hiking in Patagonia, which told him she was adventurous and valued experiences over material things. He learned that her relationship with her family was complicated, but deeply important to her. He was getting past the resume and seeing the real person. But as with the first week, there was a pitfall. In his initial excitement, he leaned into it too hard. He fired off these deep, probing questions one after another. The date, which had started as a wonderful conversation, began to feel like an interview. At one point, she laughed and said, "Wow, okay, what's the next question on your list? Am I being deposed?" Alex was mortified. He realized he had turned a technique for connection into a cudgel. I explained to him that strategic questioning is a dance. You offer a question, you genuinely listen to the answer, and then you have to offer something of yourself in return. It's the principle of reciprocity. If you ask for vulnerability, you must offer vulnerability. It's not an interrogation, it's an exchange. What's the most interesting or memorable question a date has ever asked you? Did it make you feel seen or put on the spot? Week 3 was the most delicate. We ventured into what my world calls confession psychology. Now, let's reframe that term immediately, because it's loaded. In dating, it's not about getting a confession of wrongdoing. It's about creating a space where a person feels safe enough to be vulnerable to share their fears, their past mistakes, their authentic selves. In an interrogation room, a surprising amount of my job wasn't about being tough, it was about being the most reasonable, understanding person the suspect had spoken to all day. We have a technique called minimization. You downplay the suspect's moral culpability, framing their action as a mistake anyone could have made. "Look, I get it. The pressure was on. You made a bad call." That doesn't make you a monster. This lowers their defenses and allows them to talk about what happened without feeling utterly condemned. It provides a path to the truth that isn't paved with shame. I once dealt with a young man, barely 19, who was involved in a warehouse burglary. He was terrified, defensive, and lying poorly. The other detectives had been yelling at him for an hour with no results. I walked in, sat down, and slid a cup of coffee across the table. I told him a story about a stupid thing I did when I was his age, how scared I was, and how the cover-up made everything 10 times worse. I didn't condemn him. I connected with him, and within 20 minutes, he told me everything. He just needed to feel like he was talking to a human being who understood that good people sometimes make bad decisions. The principle is universal. Shame shuts people down, but empathy opens them up. Alex's assignment was to apply this principle of creating psychological safety. He was on a third date, a point where conversations can naturally start to deepen into topics like past relationships. The trap here is to ask accusatory questions like, "So, why did your last relationship end?" That question puts a person on trial. They have to defend themselves, justify their actions, and often cast their ex as the villain. Instead, I coached Alex to lead with his own vulnerability. He said something like, "Past relationships can be so tough to navigate. I know I've learned some really hard lessons about my own flaws from my past." He didn't ask her a question at all. He made a statement of empathy and shared a piece of his own struggle. This created a vacuum that she could fill without fear. And she did. She opened up about a deep-seated fear of repeating a specific pattern from her previous relationship. It was a moment of profound, honest connection. But Alex called me later that night with a sense of unease. He said, "Arthur, it felt powerful. It felt like I had a key to a locked room." He recognized the seduction of that power. The ethical line here is razor thin. The moment you use empathy as a tool to extract information for your own benefit, you are manipulating. The goal must be mutual understanding, not a one-sided disclosure. Have you ever felt that you could steer a conversation toward a vulnerable topic? What separates a moment of genuine connection from one that feels like emotional prying? The fourth and final week was about integration. In the field, this is the hardest part. You can learn all the techniques in the book: how to read a micro-expression, how to frame a question, how to build rapport. But if you're just following a checklist in your head, a smart subject will see right through you. You'll be stiff, unnatural, and predictable. True mastery is when the techniques disappear and become a part of your instinct. It's about being so completely present in the moment that you're not thinking. You're just reacting, listening, and responding with genuine curiosity. You stop performing the role of an interrogator and simply become an effective listener. It's the difference between a musician who is mechanically playing the notes on the page and one who is feeling the music and making it their own. I remember one of my most challenging cases, a corporate spy who was ex-intelligence. He was trained to resist every technique I knew. He was a stone wall. The breakthrough didn't come from a clever question or a psychological trick. It came after hours of conversation about everything but the case. I was just listening, fully present, when I noticed a pattern. He would talk animatedly about his travels, his education, his family, but every time the topic drifted toward his professional career before this job, he would grow quiet, not defensive, just empty. It was a silence, a void. That was the tell. His whole life was an open book except for one chapter. That's where we focused our investigation, and that's where we found the truth. It was an insight born not from technique, but from total, immersive listening. For Alex, this final week was about letting go of the assignments. No specific tactics. Just go on dates and try to be the most present, authentic, and curious version of himself. With these new tools humming in the background, he stopped thinking, "Okay, that was a flicker of sadness. I should ask a rapport-building question." Instead, he just felt his own natural curiosity and empathy. He noticed the sadness and, without thinking, said, "That sounds like it was a difficult time." He wasn't deploying a technique, he was being a compassionate human being. The conversations became more fluid and far less work. He was no longer a detective trying to solve the puzzle of his date. He was just a man getting to know a woman. He told me it was the first time in years that dating actually felt fun. But there was a strange side effect. He had to consciously unlearn some of his new habits. He had to stop himself from constantly scanning and analyzing. I told him that's normal. It's like an agent coming off a long undercover assignment. You spend so long being hyper-vigilant that you forget how to just relax and trust. The final lesson is that these tools are not a personality. They are amplifiers. They can amplify your empathy, your curiosity, and your authenticity. But if you don't have those things to begin with, they amplify nothing at all. Have you ever felt like you were putting on a dating persona? What would it feel like to let that go and just be present? So, after a month of applying the principles of interrogation to the unpredictable world of dating, what were the results? What did Alex's little experiment yield? Let's look at the raw numbers, the way we would with a case file. Over 4 weeks, he went on 8 dates with 4 different women. With 2 of them, things fizzled out after the first meeting. But here's the difference. It wasn't a mystery to him. He didn't spend days wondering what went wrong. Through careful observation and better questions, he understood clearly that they simply weren't a match on a fundamental level of values and interests. There was no ghosting, no confusion, just a respectful parting of ways. A 3rd woman became a genuine friend. The intense, honest conversations created a strong bond of respect, even if the romantic spark wasn't there. And the 4th woman? That's the one that's still going. They're several weeks in now, and he says it's the healthiest, most honest connection he's ever had. It started on a foundation not of performance, but of clarity. But the most surprising outcome of this entire experiment wasn't what Alex learned about these women. It was what he learned about himself. This is something I've seen time and time again. You go into a situation thinking your job is to understand the other person, and you walk out with a shocking new understanding of yourself. Alex realized that his old dating habits were entirely defensive. He asked boring, surface-level questions because, deep down, he was afraid of the answers. He was afraid of discovering an incompatibility that would lead to rejection. He missed social cues and facial expressions not because he was unobservant, but because he was so busy in his own head, anxiously planning his next sentence to make sure he sounded impressive. He wasn't connecting with them because he was disconnected from himself. If I were to distill this down to what to keep and what to ditch, it would be this: keep the foundational principles, keep the radical commitment to being present, keep the art of the open-ended question that springs from genuine curiosity, keep the goal of creating a space where the other person feels safe enough to be authentic. But you have to ditch the mindset of the technician. Ditch the checklist. Ditch the idea that you are reading someone to find their flaws or gain an advantage. People aren't puzzles to be solved or suspects to be broken. They are stories waiting to be told, but only if they feel they have a safe and interested audience. I learned that lesson the hard way early in my own marriage. I came home one day, still in my professional mindset, and started questioning my wife about her day, looking for inconsistencies, trying to solve her bad mood. She looked at me and said, "Arthur, stop interrogating me. I'm your wife, not your suspect. Just listen." It was a bucket of cold water to the face, but she was right. What has your own dating life taught you, not about others, but about your own patterns and defenses? Now, we need to have a very serious talk. We need to draw a bright, clear line in the sand between influence and manipulation. This is the most important takeaway from this entire discussion, because the tools I've described are powerful, and like any powerful tool, they can be used to build or they can be used to destroy. A scalpel in the hand of a surgeon can save a life. That same scalpel in the hand of a criminal can take one. The instrument itself is neutral. The difference is the intent of the person holding it. Influence, in its purest form, is about achieving clarity. It's about presenting your own thoughts and feelings with honesty and creating an environment where the other person can do the same. It leads to mutual understanding, even if that understanding is that you're not compatible. It builds trust. Manipulation, on the other hand, is about achieving a desired outcome at the expense of the other person's autonomy. It's using hidden techniques to steer someone toward a decision they wouldn't otherwise make, to elicit an emotion for your own benefit, or to gain an unfair advantage. It incinerates trust. In my old job, I saw interrogators who crossed that line. I knew a detective, a very sharp guy, who was an artist at manipulating a suspect's fears and insecurities. He could play on a person's shame about their family or their financial troubles to corner them into a confession. And he got results. He closed cases. But he got false confessions too. He ruined lives. He saw people not as human beings, but as complex locks to be picked. He won the game, but he lost his soul in the process. He eventually drank himself out of the job. The moral corrosion was absolute. So how do you know which side of the line you're on? It comes down to one simple question you must ask yourself. What is my intent? On a date, is your intent to genuinely understand who this person is and to allow them to understand you? Or is your intent to get them to like you, to impress them, to get them to reveal their red flags so you can disqualify them, or to steer them into a physical relationship? The moment your goal shifts from mutual discovery to a self-serving outcome, you have stepped into the realm of manipulation. When you notice a micro-expression, are you using it to empathize or to exploit? When you ask a deep question, is it to build a bridge or to dig a moat? The only ethically sound approach is to pursue connection for its own sake. The truth is, if you have to manipulate someone into liking you, they don't actually like you. They like the character you're playing. And that is the loneliest victory of all. Think about a time you felt truly understood by someone. What did they do to create that feeling? So where does this leave us? We've taken a look into the dark, methodical world of interrogation and tried to find a little light for the messy, hopeful world of human connection. The grand conclusion of Alex's experiment is both simple and profound. The most effective tool for understanding another human being isn't a clever tactic or a psychological trick. It's a fusion of genuine curiosity and the courage to be authentic yourself. It's about having the observational skill to see that flicker of emotion on someone's face and the empathy to care about what it means. It's about asking the kind of questions that show you're not just interested in their resume, but in their soul. And it's about building a space safe enough that they might actually be willing to show it to you. Now, I'm certainly not telling you to go out there and start a case file on your next Tinder date. Please don't do that. But I am genuinely curious. After hearing about all this, would you consider trying to apply some of these underlying principles? The commitment to asking better, more open-ended questions, the conscious effort to create a space of psychological safety, maybe by sharing a small vulnerability of your own first. I want you to think about it. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts or stories. The dynamics of human interaction are endlessly fascinating, and a date is just a very specific, high-stakes version of that. We spend our lives trying to read people, trying to understand them. It's a messy, imperfect science, but it's one of the most worthwhile things we can do. If you want to continue peeling back the layers of human behavior with me the right way, the ethical way, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more to discuss. Next time, we're going to tackle all the popular myths about body language that are probably getting you into more trouble than they're worth. To leave you with a question, and I imagine the answers will be illuminating. What's the biggest dating red flag you've ever spotted? I've certainly seen my share in my day, and I have a feeling the stories down below will be ones for the books. Stay observant and stay honest, especially with yourself.